This episode is sponsored by Camp, the DIFC-based fitness club that just launched Mums and Bumps, a new class dedicated entirely for pregnant and postpartum women. Welcome to Next of Kin, the podcast. I'm your host Emma, a British expat, toddler mum and business owner living in Dubai. Join me for candid conversations about expat motherhood, business and everything in between. I've invited some incredible guests to join me this season who you are really going to want to know about. So let's jump straight in. Welcome back, guys. This week I'm speaking to Lauren Brennan of Key Global, a company with a lot of strings to their bow, but what we're focusing on today is their education guidance. So basically helping parents to select the right school. Now, I have a 2-year-old, so I'm completely clueless about this kind of thing. I'm still nearly 2 years away from her even starting FS1. I still think teachers and head teachers are intimidating, and so picking a school is certainly a daunting task. But I have to admit, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. So I have a lot of questions for Lauren, and I feel very lucky to get to pick her brains today. But before we get into today's chat, I want to introduce you to today's sponsor, Camp. I had the pleasure to go down to see the studio myself, and I couldn't believe I hadn't known about this place before, so I am absolutely thrilled to be able to spread the word and offer you a discounted rate of 65 dirhams for your first class when you quote Next of Kin when booking. Based in DIFC, Camp is a revolutionary fitness club which focuses on mental training, allowing you to discover your ultimate potential through the use of heart-pumping music and rhythmic movement. Camp offers indoor cycle, boot camp, and now Mums and Bumps, a new class that caters to the special needs of pregnant and postpartum women. The class will have an emphasis on core and pelvic floor health, led by a qualified pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. It will provide a safe and effective workout tailored to the needs of mums in these amazing life stages. What impressed me most about this studio was the facilities. The changing rooms and the women's area is amazing, and they even have a kids area so that you can leave your little one with their nanny or use one of Camp's nannies whilst you work out, and they'll be taken totally care of. The new Mums and Bumps class takes place on Tuesdays at 10:15am and Fridays, so don't forget to quote Next of Kin when booking to get your first class for 65 dirhams. Their WhatsApp number to book is in the show notes. Now let's get on with the show. Lauren, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. I have an endless list of questions, but first, please could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm Lauren Brennan and I'm the Executive Director of Key Global.
Great. And before we talk about what Key Global is, can you tell me a bit about your background?
Sure. So I've been in Dubai for 13 years now, nearly 14, so a long time. And a bit about myself, I've got 2 kiddies, one's 4 years old and 2-year-old little girl, here with my husband, and I've got 4 dogs as well, so do excuse any noise in the background if you can hear them barking. I'm from Scotland originally. We came out to Dubai, like I say, 13 years ago, and my background is mainly in HR and education. So I started out in HR here, but mostly in the education sector. Worked for a few education companies, Talim, James, and then ventured out on my own to set up Key Global 7 years ago.
And so why did you decide to start Key Global?
To be honest, I'd worked for the big education companies, and as much as I really enjoyed that job, I did see a bit of a need for kind of a smaller independent company to come into the market and just offer some slightly different services. So initially we started as a recruitment consultancy where we kind of created a better experience for teachers, bringing them into the region and making sure they were onboarded properly. And then from there, the business just kind of grew arms and legs, to be honest. And we moved into some different areas. But I wanted to do something that really challenged me as well. And to be honest, the biggest reason was that I knew we were going to start a family and I wanted flexibility. So working for myself gave me that level of flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk today more about picking a school, which is just one of the arms to Key Global. But first, I have to ask, you've been in Dubai for 13 years, did you say?
That's right.
When you moved over, did you say you were just going to move for 2 years and then it ended up being 13?
Exactly. We had a 3-year plan and now it's 13 years and now we're about to buy a house here, and so we're here for the long term.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. It's every expat's story, isn't it? One thing I hear a lot is people comparing the education system here in the UAE to the UK, and you get comments either end of the spectrum. You either get people saying that it's nowhere near as good as the UK system and others saying that it's way better. So I'd love to know your thoughts, just as a really overarching idea of what the system is like here.
To be honest, we wouldn't take our kids back to the UK to go to school, and that's just from, I guess, a personal and a professional perspective. We love the school system here. It is so advanced. It's such a safe school system. I've full confidence in it, and I know that that's not the case in every single school, but like you say, overarching in general, I think the quality of education here is fantastic.
I mean, I don't know a lot about schooling because I've only got a 2-year-old, but from the schools that I've spoken to, it seems so much more well-rounded. I guess we're also having to compare it to the fact that if my daughter Bonnie was to go to school in the UK, she would just be going to whatever school we were close to. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't exactly be going to a private school, and I wouldn't be expecting to pick a school. Whereas here, I feel like the choice is so broad. It's really hard to actually narrow down what school you want to send them to.
It really is, and this is one of the main things that we have parents come to us for is, where do we start? We just don't know where to start because the choice is so amazing. But the good thing about that is that there's something for every child here, because kids are different types of learners and they don't all suit one curriculum versus another. So, there's so much choice, and yes, it's difficult to navigate to start with, but I think if you can find the right support or find the right person to advise you, then the choice is just fantastic. It can be a really good thing.
So where do you start?
Where do you start? Yep, this is the $1 million question. Well, normally what we do is when we speak to parents, we want to find out what they actually want from a school, because every single child is different, but every family is different as well. And the things that are important to each family are different. So, for example, for some families, it's about the commute. Let's say mum and dad are both working. There's got to be flexibility there in terms of drop off and pick up times. So I think, first of all, making yourself a list of what are the really, really important things, because not all schools will offer flexible timings, for example. But maybe it could be things like extracurricular activities. If you have kids who are a little bit further up the school, what are their areas of interest? So do they offer drumming lessons? Do they offer piano lessons? Whatever their area of interest is. So there's so many different factors that you need to consider. So what we normally do is we work with parents to figure out, first of all, what's your hit list, basically? What are the things you really need? And once you know that kind of helps you then to determine what type of school you're looking for. Because if it's location based, then that gives us a really small window of what schools we would be looking at. Whereas if that's not important, you can kind of branch out and look at different areas. So I guess having that hit list, first of all, of your top factors, and then you can take it from there.
I tell you what, that location factor is why I've started to think about schools already, because we're in an apartment at the moment that we don't plan to be in long term. So I want to know, where should we move to that's going to be close to a school that we like? But we also need to think about FS1, and something I think is really daunting is that a lot of the schools here are through schools, aren't they? And I hear stories about how if you're just going to school that goes up to year 6 and then need to find a secondary school, that you might not get a spot at the school that you want, because is that something that we need to be considering when we're looking at FS1?
So I think this is a really difficult question, and it's the one that we get asked probably most often, because, like when my son went into FS1, they're 3 years old, they're so little. How do you decide at that point whether it's the right school for them? I think there's one reassuring thing, which is there are so many school options in Dubai. So I have a friend right now who put her little boy in an IB school because she felt that was the right thing. 1 year in, she's realised, no, this is not right. He needs more structure. He needs a bit more discipline. So actually, she's going to move him into a British curriculum school because she feels that's more of a fit. She felt that was the dream school, but it turns out it's not. So I guess just a reassuring thing, there's so many school options that even if you do have to make that move, if you go through FS1, FS2 and you realise it's not right, you can always switch. It depends for some schools. So, like, for example, my little boy goes to Jess Ranchis. If you don't get in there in FS1, you're probably not getting in there again. So it depends on what you're really looking for from a school. But I would say it's not something to worry about because there's so much choice, and almost don't put so much pressure on yourself because they're 3 years old. You don't really know what type of learner they're going to be until they get a little bit further through the school. But that being said, there is competition for schools. So I guess that's probably where trying to get it as right as possible in the first instance, having all those factors figured out, but you're not always going to get it 100% right. So just try not to put pressure on yourself, I guess.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have so many questions to ask you now. Firstly, let's talk then about the curriculums, British curriculum, IB, but then there's also quite a lot of, I don't know if there's quite a lot, but I know there's also more alternative schools. Like there's Al Zaya, I think it's changed to Al Fanar, and that's more Steiner or Waldorf based. I don't really know what the difference is between all these different curriculums. So could you please simplify for me?
Sure. So I think the two main ones that we have questions around are British and IB. They're probably the ones that most parents are asking questions around. The simple way I always like to think about the two of them is that the British curriculum has a little bit more structure, maybe a little bit more discipline to it. So like my little boy will come home and say, we learned a song today about how to stand in a line, which is great, right? That's a good skill to learn. Whereas IB probably allows for a little bit more kind of free flow, a little bit more creativity in terms of learners. With all the other curriculums, there is so much that is on offer here. We could probably spend the next 2 hours going through the difference between them all. You've got American curriculum, you've got Reggio Emilio, you've got Montessori. What I would say is that there's a curriculum for every child out there. We actually, as a company, offer just free advice on curriculum. So when you do a first discovery call with us, we'll talk you through the curriculums because, like I say, there's so many on offer. We also sometimes have students come to us who are looking, specifically for a French-speaking school or for a German-speaking school. So again, that's going into a whole other area of curriculum. But it is something that we offer where we would talk parents through the different types of curricula because there's just so much on offer. But again, going back to what we said earlier, I think that's probably a good thing, to be honest, that there's so much out there. There's a lot of kind of different curriculums trying to come in as well. So a lot of curriculum from Scandinavia as well, and trying to bring in very much kind of play-based, no rules, no restrictions, just the child learns completely freely. I know that probably wouldn't be for my kids because they need a little bit more discipline, but for some kids that really works. So I don't think that really answers your question, Emma, but there's just so many out there. I think it would take us so long to go through them all.
Yeah, of course. And you know what? It really appeals to me, all that Scandinavian play-based. I mean, homeschooling and world schooling and all these things appeal to me because I love all of the ideas behind it. But then I look at my daughter. She's only 2. She is learning the alphabet. She's learned herself numbers. And that's not come from me. Like, this is so her. And so you do have to take the child for who they are, don't you? And adapt that instead 100%. Of going with... Otherwise, I definitely would be sending her to some progressive hippie school for sure, because I love the idea of it. But I think she is going to be a British curriculum kind of gal.
Mm-hmm. And, this is a really good point as well, because, one of the things to consider is, why are you making that choice on the school? Is it your choice as a parent, or are you making the choice based on what you feel your child actually needs? And there's got to be a bit of come and go. Obviously, it's got to work for the parents, but it's about what what is the best option for your child based on what you know about them right now, because they'll change and they'll grow and they'll develop, but based on what you know right now. And you can look at the way that they play, the way they interact with other kids. Do you think that they would work well learning how to stand in a line, or would they run out of that line and go elsewhere, in which case that's not the right approach for them. But really the only way to know that is to test it out. And both my kids went to nursery first before we went into FS1, and one of the main reasons I did that was to kind of test that water and see what were they like, what type of curriculum would suit them. And both of mine will go through British, I think, but they might change, so it just depends on the kid.
Yeah, of course. What worries a lot of parents as well is that most schools here are selective, aren't they? And they do assessments for the children, which seems quite harsh on a 3-year-old. So what are they actually looking for, and how picky are they?
So this is a great question, and one that's quite fresh in my mind. So earlier last week, at the end of last week, I took my 2-year-old daughter for her assessment at Jess. And so many parents turn up and they're worried and they're stressed, and all that happens is it is play. So there's a few kind of teachers dotted around, and they're just observing the child. They're just looking to see, are they able to interact? Can they communicate, first of all? Because that's a big thing. So are they able to communicate when they come to school and, tell the teacher that they need to go to the toilet or that they're hungry? Because if they can't communicate, then that's something that they need to put support in place for. So that's one of the big things, I think. Also checking their kind of fine motor skills. Are they able to do things for themselves? Can they pick up their bag? Can they open their lunchbox? When they go to the toilet, can they do things themselves? So that, again, is another thing they're really looking for. They are definitely not looking for how clever the child is, or can they count to 10? Do they know their alphabet? You don't have to come prepared with anything like that. I think it's just these main things: communication, can they do a few things for themselves? They also want to see if they are reasonably independent. So are they going to allow mum and dad to leave, and let them be in that space without the support of mum and dad? That happens sometimes and it doesn't, and other times my little boy went in no problem himself. My little girl needed me there the whole time. That doesn't mean she won't get a place. She might still get a place, but they're looking for these things. I think they need to assess what level of support a child needs, if any. So if there is something like a communication issue or a speech delay, do they need to put in some kind of provision there to make sure that that child is able to communicate and they've got the support that they need? So I think the assessments are something that I worried about definitely when I took my little boy the first time, and I get why parents worry about them, but I think just don't overthink it and just let them be themselves, basically.
It's literally making me feel nervous, just the thought of it, because Bonnie's so bright and should be an asset, I'm sure, in any school. But will she actually walk off and leave me? Probably not. So what do you do? Because for those children, maybe a bit like Bonnie, who are just going to want to cling to their mum or their dad and probably not do all the independent things in that assessment, what do you do?
So I think this is just a natural thing, right? I mean, my little boy's in FS2 now, and some mornings he still clings on to me and cries. It's just something that they naturally go through. And at that age, emotionally, they're 2-3 years old. It's okay for them to still need mum and dad and still want that attachment. If they were walking off from you and saying bye every single day, that would actually be a bit more concerning, I think. But I think if that was to happen in the assessment, it's just, I mean, I've seen a few parents kind of step back and say, no, you can't do that. No, don't do this. But just nurture, be with them, do what you would normally do. And then once they feel comfortable, they'll come out their shell and they'll start to play. So with Erin last week, she never cried, but she wanted to make sure I was still with her the whole time. And as long as she could see me, she was fine. And she continued to play. But they're never going to do what you want them to do. You want them to show off and show all the amazing things that they just done for you at home, the singing and the dancing and the counting to 20. And they're never going to do that when you want them to. So just don't worry about it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Something a friend told me to really think about when selecting a school as well is to make sure that the ethos fits with what you're doing at home. So selecting like a Montessori school when that's just not who you are at home. I think for me, I'm fairly lax on different kind of rules. Something I found hard myself when I was at school is having rules like not being allowed to wear makeup when that doesn't affect my learning. And I think that's the kind of thing that I just couldn't stand there if Bonnie was to be told off about it. I know we're talking like a lot of years in advance, but yeah, I'm wondering, how do you assess those kind of values in a school?
So again, great question. And it's something that we work with parents on, is to figure out what values do they have at home and what do they want to see in a school. I would say the only way to assess those values is to go and visit the school, to go and speak to the school, speak to, the principal or the heads of year, speak to some of the teachers and get a real feel for the school. There's something we always tell our parents, that when you walk through the gates of the school, you'll either get a feeling that, that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling you get, like, oh, this is the right place, or you'll think, I'm not sure. And if you have that doubt, you should listen to that doubt, because it's there for a reason. So definitely going to visit the school. In the case where you can, maybe have someone that you trust do it for you, and then, sort of talk you through what they felt. But even if you can't actually physically visit the school, you could still speak with some of the team, whether that's the head of year, the head of admissions even, or potentially the principal or the VP.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I've only visited one school, and that was just because I was nosy and I was going to see the nursery. So I got them to show me the whole school. But even with that one, the school, I was like, I am so impressed by this school. But the nursery, straight away, I was like, no, this isn't right. And on paper, everything looked amazing. But that feeling, I was like, no. And when I went to see other nurseries, the nursery that Bonnie goes to, I wasn't even thinking to send her there, but they had an open day. So I thought, let's go and have a play. And then straight away, I was like, Rich, you need to go and see that nursery. So it's so interesting that it is all on a gut feeling, really. But what do you do with the parents then that are looking to move from abroad, so they can't necessarily come and see the schools?
So what we do is we have like a bank of resources where we've went to visit schools and we found out about, their values, their ethos. We've spoke to the principal. We've got a lot of recorded tours as well that we can then send on to parents. But we tend to have like a discovery call over Zoom or Teams with the parents first, find out what exactly they're looking for, and then we'll shortlist some schools for them. And then what we can do is we get on a longer call and we'll sit and talk them through the school. We'll show them, this is the video tour of the school, this is their values. And once they've decided which schools they're interested in, we can always go back and actually visit that school for them, ask specific questions that they might have. And then normally what most parents want to do is have like a visit before they move over. And so we'll set up for them to come visit the school, meet the key people, whether that's the admissions head or the head of year, and then they get a chance to actually visit the school at that point. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes parents are happy to take, our recommendation based on what information we've given them, because it might just not be possible for them to come and do a visit first.
Yeah. And do you have any recommendations to help the child settle when they're moving from abroad?
The biggest one I would give would be just make it as normal as possible. So we are obviously excited about moving to a new country, coming to a new school. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is make the child overexcited. So like, we're going to your new school today. Are you so excited? And they're excited until they get there, and then they cry because you've almost overwhelmed them with emotion. So I would say make it as normal as possible. Try and it depends on the age of the child as well, but maybe try and help them be involved in that decision process. Do you think this is a school you would like? Come and watch the tours with us, especially if they're a little bit older. And then if you have any connections in Dubai, like if you're coming to Dubai and you know people there, maybe get them to show you around. If they've got children of similar age, that can also help. But I would say just normalize it. Keep it as every day as possible. Yes, it's exciting, but let's not go crazy.
Yeah. And there's so many different Facebook groups you can join now as well. And I often see on certain Facebook Facebook groups, people that are moving over, and they'll set up like a play day or something like that with people that they know are going to be in that school.
Facebook groups are fantastic for that kind of thing, definitely. The one thing I would say is, when you're looking for schools, be careful of asking for advice on Facebook groups, because remember that it's very biased. It's based on each individual's perception, and it's great to hear, different viewpoints, but we don't always know the context behind. If someone gives a bad review, for example, you don't always know the context behind it. But also, if someone gives a really positive review, they could be a teacher at that school. So just bear in mind that, they're quite subjective when we use Facebook groups that way, but they are great for connections and networking when you're new to the region.
That is so true, actually, because I see that all the time. What do people think about this school? Or just asking for a list of schools. Yep. But each school, I guess, is good in their own way for their own people, or their own people that are right for that school. So you don't know the context, do you, if someone's saying they like it?
Exactly. And what we tend to see is, when people do respond on these messages on Facebook, they tend to list the schools that have got an outstanding KHDA rating. But that does not mean that that is the right school for your child. Just because it has outstanding or very good, that's great. And they've obviously been assessed at that rating. Fantastic. But it doesn't mean it's a fit for your child. So we always tell our parents, yes, you can consider the rating. That's, it's always good to look at that. But it's really not the most important thing. You need to figure out what the right fit is for your child, not based on the rating.
That's really interesting, actually, because I would automatically probably only look at the rating and then decide out of those with an outstanding rating. But I actually don't. I've just realized I don't know what that rating even means. Like, how do they assess that?
Oh, it's a whole process. We've done years of this, going through inspections, and they are very, very thorough. KHC are fantastic, and they've got a great team that come and do the assessments and the inspections. But it's, and if they say they're outstanding, they are outstanding, absolutely. But if you're looking at an outstanding British curriculum school versus a very good IB school, you shouldn't just choose the outstanding because it's outstanding. You should look at all the other factors. Is British curriculum going to be the right fit, or would IB be a better fit? If you're looking at location and you've got a British school and an IB school, don't just go for the outstanding one because it's outstanding. Think about all those other things that might be a better fit for your child. It might be that the outstanding one's the right fit, but just making sure you consider all the factors, basically. But yeah, it's a very rigorous process. They've actually paused inspections for the next year, so just to let schools breathe a little bit, I think, and focus on development and focus on the children, and then coming back to inspections next year.
I've heard as well that if a school is new, that they can't automatically have a outstanding rating. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And they also don't get inspected for the first couple of years, because they want them to have time to embed and grow a little bit before they then do the inspection.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, really? So I obviously just want to ask you straight out what your favourite school is, but we now know from this conversation that would not be much use because it's so subjective. But are there any schools that you see that are just impressing you at the moment? Maybe they're moving the needle or doing something a bit different. Any schools that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a big fan of Jess, obviously, because that's where my little boy goes. And I have to say, it's a through school, as an all-rounded school, they've been absolutely fantastic. So the progression for him he's now in FS2 over a year has been absolutely astonishing. So I think they're doing an absolutely brilliant job, but they've been doing a brilliant job for a long time. The other school I'm super impressed with is Heartland International School. Their principal, Fiona Cottam, is one of the best for sure. But they're an incredibly welcoming school. So very, very family focused. Fiona's a great principal. She's strict, but she knows every single child's name in that school. And I think their whole leadership team is doing a really great job to grow the school and bring that real community feel. So I think they're doing a fabulous job. The other one as well that I think is doing a really great job is Fairgreen. So Fairgreen's just that little bit different. It's in Sustainable City. It's an IB school, and they're definitely doing some really interesting different things. And their diversity of teacher as well is fantastic. So they've got a great teaching team. They are all about sustainability because they're based in Sustainable City, but their diversity of teaching team I think is fantastic. They've got a whole range of teachers from all over the world, great backgrounds, great IB experience. And I think they're doing a really good job. So as an IB school, I would definitely recommend.
Wow. Okay. So many to think about. Do you really get what you pay for in Dubai with schools? Because I know there's such a difference in the pricing here.
Typically, the pricing is based on that rating. So that KHDA rating. If you're outstanding, you can charge more than very good, etc. So your fees are linked to that. I think that's a difficult question to answer. I think in the 3 schools that I just mentioned, yes, you are getting what you paid for. There's other schools that have room for improvement and potentially not getting what you paid for. But I know that that schools are working really hard to make sure you do get what you pay for. And it just is what it is now. You know, that is the cost of education in Dubai, and that's why it's so important to try and make the right choice, I think, because you're paying an awful lot of money for it. So, and I know that's why we have so many questions on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk a bit about parents with children with like unique needs or learning difficulties. Where do they start in Dubai? Where should they be looking?
So I would say still be open to any school. So during that assessment, what the school is going to be looking for is whether or not the child has any needs that need to be supported. So let's say, for example, it's a speech delay or a language delay. The provision would then be put in to support with that. Most or every school will have a team who are there just to help students who have any additional needs, who need some support, and they would be brought in to assess at that point as well. So let's say, for example, the child went for the assessment day and they identified that there was a speech delay. The parents would then probably be called in to meet with the support team, and they would talk about what the options were at that point. So if there's lots of different options, and again, this is another huge conversation, but you do have options for learning support assistants to be brought into classrooms to support children if that's required, and that can be done on a part-time or a full-time basis. There's normally a cost to the parent and a cost to the school. Each school's set up slightly differently with that. But I think just as a reassurance, there is provision for, I would say, almost every need out there in Dubai. So let the school assess what the need is, and then they can advise on the right type of provision. They might also suggest things like occupational therapy if it's required as well, and they can either have an occupational therapist in the school, or it might be someone out with the school that they'd be recommended to. So there's lots of support in place for that. And again, all of this is by KHDA rules and regulations. So things like the number of learning support assistants, what learning support assistants do, their job descriptions, etc. That's all in line with what KHDA would recommend.
Okay. And what about I guess there's so many different levels here to what we're talking about, like an additional need, like something like a speech delay that's maybe just going to take that extra bit, or there might be a child who's much more severely autistic, maybe. Are there particular schools that are for children with the more, I don't want to say severe, because severe, I don't like that word at all, but with much more additional needs when it comes to the learning support, or just wouldn't be a good fit for mainstream school?
I mean, look, all schools in the UAE are trying to be inclusive schools. And that means that regardless of what the need is, all schools are trying to accommodate that in school, rather than, having a specific school that is for children who have autism, for example. So I would say, regardless of the need, whether it's, a small language delay or, they need speech therapy, for example, or a child who has autism and ADHD, something like that. Don't rule out schools just because of that. I think all schools are trying to be inclusive. The difficulty then that schools have is making sure they have the provision for that. So they need to make sure they have the right learning support assistant who's trained in supporting a child with autism. So then the challenge becomes, well, do they have the resource for it? But definitely all schools now are trying to be completely inclusive and allow for everyone to be part of the community, basically.
Okay, interesting. So there's not a particular school that is like, I think back in the UK, and you have a school that really specialises in autism, but you're saying that it's the mainstream schools that you can still look at and just make sure that they have that resource.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll be able to tell you very quickly whether or not they have a resource for that. I mean, there are specific schools and, that are maybe more inclusive than others, as in they have a better provision because they've maybe been doing it for a longer period of time. But like I say, I wouldn't write off any school. If you're interested in a school because you like its ethos, its values, because you think that it fits all your other factors like your location, etc., go and speak to them and find out what type of provision they have.
Okay, great.
We normally actually get quite a lot of questions from parents about siblings. So like, for example, if they have a child just now who's in year 1 and then in a couple of years time they've got another child who's going to be going into FS1, they'll ask, do we automatically get a place? And siblings always get priority. So when it comes to assessment time, the siblings will go first for their assessments normally. And as long as this, there's no significant need there that the school can't provide for, then it hopefully shouldn't be an issue. But I always tell parents, you're not guaranteed a place for a sibling, but they do get priority.
Do you get a discount for siblings as well?
Depends on the school. We don't, but some schools you do.
Okay. All right.
I'd say the only other question we get asked quite a lot is about after school provision. So ECAs, what do schools do around that? And are some schools better than others? Most schools bring in external providers to run their extracurricular activities, and they have a whole range. So normally the advice we give is, we can ask about their ECA programme, but normally for FS1s, they don't run ECAs. They might run like an after school lunch club, but you don't tend to run ECAs for FS1s.
Yeah, I guess that's quite a lot when they're so young, isn't it? It's a lot of stimulation. So can you tell us a bit about Key Global and how you work and how people can contact you?
Yes, definitely. So we've basically got 4 pillars to the business. So Key is a Japanese word that means positive energy. That's where it came from. And we run Key Guidance, which is the main program that relates to what we're talking about here. So we have various different options for parents. It can be parents who are here looking for a school. It can also be parents who are just looking to change schools. So they might already be in the school system, but they want to move. Or it can be someone coming from abroad. And we offer free discovery calls, and then we take it from there. Some parents want us to do the whole process, as in visit all the schools, do the application forms, the whole thing. Some just want some advice on finding the right school. So that's the main area of the business. We also have 3 others. So we do Key Development, which is where we run teaching assistant training programs. We have Key Empowerment, which is where we support mums back into the workplace. So
Love
that can be through, it can be helping them with simple things like CV skills, confidence building, but we also run a whole range of workshops as well to help mums back into work. And then we also run Key People, which is where we still do our HR and L&D consultancy, where we help schools to improve or to run training for HR departments, etc. And to contact us, we've got our website, so www.key-global.com. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn at Key Global.
Okay, so is the best place to contact you maybe through email, through your website?
You can come through the website. That's probably the most direct way, or find us on Instagram and drop us a message on our Instagram. That's probably a good way as well.
Okay, perfect. Lauren, thank you so much. I think I'm going to have to get you back on to speak about getting back into the workforce. We've got so much to talk about.
Yep, absolutely. I'd love to. We've got a lot of women that are coming our way just now, because obviously we talk to a lot of mums through key guidance. So naturally we've got a lot of mums who are saying, how do I get back to work and what do I need to do? And even if you're not looking at getting back into work right now, but maybe say in a couple of years once the kids are in school, and you can still be doing things now to kind of build up that skill set, and a lot of skills are transferable now. So yeah, let's talk about it more.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you so much for having us.
That's all for today's episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit follow on your podcast platform, or even leave us a 5-star review. You can follow nextofkin.ae on Instagram, or my new personal Instagram, emmacoulter.insta, where I am totally unfiltered. And remember that code podcast10 will get you 10% off on your shopping over on the website nextofkin.ae. Thank you for listening. Take care.